Welcome to Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. I'm Amy Shannon, but you can call me Amy. Thank you for listening.
Hello and welcome. I hope all is well with you. I'm Amy, and today I'm talking about the banned book called A Child Called It, One Child's Courage to Survive. Um, when I think of it being a book that has been banned in several places, um, I think that more people should read this book. Um, there are, and I didn't learn it till after I finished reading the book, that there are other books that follow this one. Um, this one was a worldwide bestseller, and it is, unfortunately, it's a true story, and it's a memoir of a man when he was a child. Um, the book, it basically talks about an unforgettable account of the most severe child abuse cases in California history. Um, this book took place in the series. It's the story of Dave Pelzer, who was brutally beaten and starved by his emotionally unstable alcoholic mother, a mother who played torturous, unpredictable games that left him nearly dead. What I find about this book also is that he had other siblings, other boys, brothers in the house, and they were not treated the same way as David was. He learned how to play his mother's games in order to survive because she no longer considered him a son, but a slave, and no longer a boy, but an it. His bed was made of an old army cot in the basement. His clothes were torn and raunchy. When his mother allowed him luxury of food, it was nothing more than spoiled scraps that even the dogs refused to eat. The outside world knew nothing of his living nightmare. He had nothing or no one to turn to, but he kept his dreams alive, dream of someone taking care of him, loving him, and calling them his son. And that's kind of what the book's description is. But I find that there's so much more to his story than what it describes. Um, he's very detailed in his thoughts and his abuse and torture, and also how he stayed alive because he was resilient and strong and brave. Eventually, I mean, he at a while, for a while, she wouldn't let him change his clothes. He had to wear the same clothes all the time. They're worn and holey and torn. Um, he was in school. He was the smelly kid that stole lunches. He used to steal when kids were at recess, go in their lunch boxes and take some food so he would have something to eat. But then he got caught stealing food and he was too embarrassed and he didn't want them to call his mother because she would be mad that he actually had some food to eat. Um, and starvation was only part of, I'm sorry, this book. I read it from beginning to end, and even when my eyes got tired, I just couldn't stop reading it until I finished. And then I immediately ordered the three books that come after it and looked up Mr. Peltzer and to see how successful he is. And I think it's pretty amazing of what he overcame as a child. Um, there was a couple times when he had a substitute teacher, and the substitute actually was thinking there was something wrong. And this is the 70s where a lot of people just left what they called well enough alone, someone else's problem, someone else's business. Even though this child was coming in, bruises from head to toe, tortured, starving. And when he did find ways to get food, and his mother knew about it, when he got home, she would make him throw up. And then other things after that. Some I just do not want to go into details. Um, you know, I want to read this excerpt, and it just kind of um, stands out in my head. And um, so um, in the chapter called "The Accident," um, let's see. Here we go. One particular July day began like any other mundane day in my now slave like existence. I had not eaten in 3 days. Because school was out for the summer, my options for finding food vanished. As always during dinner, I sat at the bottom of the stairs with my buttocks on the top of my hands, listening to the sounds of the family eating. Mother now demanded that I sit on my hands with my head thrust backwards in a prisoner of war position. I let my head fall forward, half dreaming that I was one of them, a member of the family. I must have fallen asleep because I was suddenly awakened by Mother's snarling voice. Get up here, move your ass, she yelled. At the at the first syllable of her order, I snapped my head back, stood up, and sprinted up the stairs. I prayed that tonight I would get something, anything, to soothe my hunger. I had begun I had begun clearing the dishes from the dining table at a feverish pace when Mother called me into the kitchen. I bowed my head as she began to babble her time limits to me. You have 20 minutes, one more minute, 1 second more, and you go hungry again. Is that understood? Yes, ma'am. Look at me when I'm talking to you, she snapped. Obeying her command, I slowly raised my head. As my head came up, I saw Russell, who was his little brother, rocking back and forth on Mother's left leg. The harsh tone of Mother's voice didn't seem to bother him. He simply stared at me through a set of cold eyes. Even though Russell was only 4 or 5 years old at the time, he had become Mother's little Nazi, watching my every move, making sure I didn't steal food. Sometimes he would make up tales for Mother so he could watch me receive punishment. It really wasn't Russell's fault. I knew Mother had brainwashed him, but I had begun to turn cold towards him and hate him just the same. Do you hear me? Mother yelled. Look at me when I'm talking to you. As I looked at her, Mother snatched a carving knife from the counter and screamed, If you don't finish on time, I'm going to kill you. Her words had no effect on me. She said the same thing over and over again for almost a week. Even Russell wasn't fazed by her threat. He kept rocking on Mother's legs as if he were riding a stick pony. Apparently, she wasn't pleased with her renewed tactic because she continued to badger on and on as the clock ticked away, eating up my time limit. I wish she would just shut up and let me work. I was desperate to meet her time limits. I wanted so much to have something to eat. I dreaded going to sleep another night. Something looked wrong, very wrong. I strained to focus my eyes on Mother. She had begun to wave the knife in her right hand. Again, I was not overly frightened. She had done this before, too. Eyes, I told myself. Look at her in the eyes. I did, and they seemed normal for her, half glazed over. But my instincts told me there was something wrong. I didn't think she was going to hit me, but my body began to tense anyway. As I became more tense, I saw what was wrong, partly because of Russell's rocking motion and partly because the motion of her arm and hand with the knife. Mother's whole body began to weave back and forth. For a moment, I thought she was going to fall. She tried to regain her balance, snapping at Russell to let go of her leg while she continued to scream at me. Then her upper body looked like a rocking chair that was out of control. Forgetting about her useless threats, I imagined that the old drunk was going to fall flat on her face. I focused all of my attention on Mother's face. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw a blurred object fly from her hand. A sharp pain erupted. from just above my stomach. I tried to remain standing, but my legs gave out and my world turned black. As I regained consciousness, I felt a warm sensation flowing from my chest. It took me a few seconds to realize where I was. I sat propped up on the toilet. I turned towards Russell, who began chanting, "David's going to die. The boy's going to die." I moved my eyes towards my stomach. On her knees, Mother was hastily applying a thick wad of gauze to a place on my stomach where dark red blood pumped out. I tried to say something. I knew it was an accident. I wanted Mother to know I forgave her, but I felt too faint. My head slumped forward again and again. As I tried to hold it up, I lost track and I returned to darkness. Um, this encounter did not result in David going to the hospital. Um, his mother took care of it almost like she was caring for a slave, like it was nothing. And I'm sorry that I paused because as a mother, even though my sons are grown, I cannot imagine a mother, and I know they do, doing these things to their own child. And picking just one out to do it, and it doesn't, it obviously it's affecting David, but his brothers as well, which he doesn't see them as brothers because they go along with what their mother does, even the father. um anyway, yes, this is a bad book and I love reading it, and I'm looking forward to reading the ones that follow. Um, I did write a review. I gave it 5 stars. Um, I beg my pardon. David Pelzer writes a powerful and emotional memoir about his abuse as a child in A Child Called It, A Child's Courage to Survive. A Child Called It is a very powerful and emotional book. It's the first book I read by the author. The author shares his terrible experiences with child abuse. And I say child abuse, but it was pure and simple torture. Starting out as a regular family with happy parents and brothers, David thinks he's got everything he needs. Things seem to turn on a dime with his mother, being the dominant one in the family. At first, his father tries to help him and stick up for him, but eventually his father is worn down by his mother, and no matter what his wife does to the boy, he turns a blind eye. David went from being David to the boy. David is the one of the family where his mother focuses her anger and sadistic torture, while the other boys in the family are untouched and deflated to the point that they believe that David is a bad boy. The torture includes starvation, being beaten if he steals food so he can eat, or eats out of the trash. David does his best as a child to think of ways to eat or even get a morsel of food, but his mother always catches on. Evil would not describe this person. However, young David is resilient. Sometimes he wish he would just die to get it over with, and other times he is determined to live and leave this place. Family, friends, neighbors, schools see the abuse but not do anything. After dehumanizing him by taking away his name, calling him the boy, she added another depth of torture by telling him he was an it. The abuse is in the 70s when David was a young child, and it was just the start of people thinking that things like that should not be happening. David was labeled the smelly kid who stole food, making him an outcast in school. It is definitely an emotional roller coaster, making you want to cry while also cheering David's strength, even at his weakest point. His mother stabbed him, beat him, put her put him in what she called her gas chamber, where she locked him in the bathroom, adding bleach and ammonia for its poisonous gas. Eventually, someone at a school finally Had enough of him coming in with bruises, torn and worn, unwashed clothes. Some of the pages you end up reading slower than others, not to miss anything. I must say that David was very brave as a child, and to him, thank you for sharing his stories. So that is A Child Called It. It is this on my homepage of amysbookshelfreviews.com. There is a section called Banned Book Spotlights. So any banned book that I read and review, this is a place on my homepage for it. Thank you very much for listening to this. And don't forget, if you're an author who wants to be on the show or you just want your book to be on the show, go to amysbookshelfreviews.com.
This has been Amy's Bookshelf Reviews podcast. Thank you for listening. And always, be kind and stay safe. Thank you.
/podcast for more information. If you're an author and you want your book to be reviewed, go to amysbookshelf.com for more information. Thank you, and I'll talk to you next week.